Today's Ask the Expert series focuses on DM and anxiety. The mission of the Myotonic Dystrophy Foundation is a care and a cure, and this is to enhance the quality of life of people living with myotonic dystrophy and to accelerate research focused on finding treatments and a cure. Our work focuses on support and education, research, and advocacy. You can find a number of resources from the Myotonic Dystrophy Foundation at our website. You can access our toolkits and publications, including critical care guidelines to help in the management of all forms of myotonic dystrophy at myotonic.org/toolkits-publications. You can find virtual support groups and Facebook chats and other support resources at myotonic.org/find-support. You can access all of our events, including events like Ask the Expert, at our calendar at myotonic.org/calendar/month. And you can access presentations like this and all of our other presentations from past events and series at myotonic.org/digital-academy. Even this event is being recorded and will be archived there. I'd like to share a number of really great updates and exciting opportunities with all of our community members, starting with International Myotonic Dystrophy Awareness Day. This is the first time such a day has been declared, and it will be this September 15th. You can join our Global Alliance and learn more and find toolkits to help raise awareness online and in your community at myotonic.org/international-DM-day. It is a bittersweet announcement to share that we have come to the end of two incredible virtual education series for 2021. Those are our Meet the DM Drug Developer and this series that you are watching today, Ask the Expert. This will be our final edition of Ask the Expert for 2021. You can see we've covered a number of topics, including exercise, pulmonary, GI, cardiology, and so on with our Ask the Expert series. And today, of course, we are covering mental health and anxiety. And our Meet the DM Drug Developers series has introduced us to a number of drug developers who are working on treatments and a cure for myotonic dystrophy. You can find all of these programs archived online. If you go to our archives at myotonic.org/meet-DM-drug-developers, you will find the Meet the DM Drug Developer series archived and complete, as well as this series, Ask the Expert, at myotonic.org/ask-expert-series. Our virtual learning will continue in 2022. If you have ideas for speakers or topics, please email info@myotonic.org. We are so excited that the 2021 Virtual MDF Annual Conference is coming up soon. Registration is open now. This event takes place September 10 and 11, which is a Friday and a Saturday in early September. And we will begin with our First Timers Tea. This is a special event, especially for those who are attending their first conference, but everyone is welcome and encouraged to attend. This will be Thursday, September 9th. There will be community tracks for DM1, DM2, and caregivers and self-care. We are also doing a professional track for our clinicians, researchers, and industry experts. You can register right now. There are low and no cost options for community members. So please register today at myotonic.org/2021-virtual-annual-conference. If you go to the myotonic.org main page, you'll find ways to register right there as well. All of these sessions will be recorded and posted to MDF's Digital Academy. All of the series that I have discussed, our Meet the DM Drug Developer, today's Ask the Expert and our conference sessions, you can find past sessions of all forms at our digital academy online. Go to myotonic.org/digital-academy. And if you have any questions about this or other events, please contact us. We can't wait to hear from you. You can reach us by phone at 415-800-7777 or email info@myotonic.org. And now I am very excited to introduce today's expert. I don't mind sharing with you all that I am a huge fan of Missy Dixon. Missy is a PhD and Master of Science in psychology and assistant professor of pediatric neurology, psychiatry, and behavioral health at the University of Utah. Dr. Dixon, or Missy, provides clinical services at Primary Children's Hospital as a member of a multidisciplinary team serving children with neuromuscular disorders, and as a therapist working with children who have chronic medical conditions. Dr. Dixon's research is focused on cognitive functioning and brain connectivity in individuals with neuromuscular diseases. She works with an interdisciplinary team to identify central nervous system involvement in myotonic dystrophy and other neuromuscular diseases, using sophisticated neurocognitive and functional neuroimaging outcome measures. Additionally, she researches the psychosocial impact of living with muscular dystrophy and neurogenic disorders. With that, I am pleased to turn things over to Missy for a presentation about DM and anxiety. Let's all welcome Missy Dixon.
Hi, everyone. Hi, Michael. Thank you so much for a lovely, lovely introduction. I am super honored and excited to be here today. And I will be talking about myotonic dystrophy and anxiety. And I think anxiety is a really relevant topic right now in our everyday lives, particularly as we are all living through the multiple waves of this pandemic and living through the ambiguity of it. So my talk today is about anxiety as it relates to the DM community, but I also want everybody to know that this applies to everybody, not just those in the DM community. Let's see if I can switch slides here. Okay, so no relevant disclosures. Objectives for today for this talk really want to help promote a sense of well-being and empower the myotonic dystrophy community. I will be explaining anxiety and stress and the symptoms associated with anxiety and stress, what that looks like in adult and pediatric populations. Slight overview overlap of depression, but mostly I'll be focusing on anxiety. I will also be talking about activities of daily living and how anxiety can impact activities of daily living. And then I will introduce everyone to cognitive behavioral therapy coping strategies to help manage anxiety. These are things that we teach in therapy, but can easily be done at home. And you don't always need a therapist to guide you through that. And then we'll run through a little practice exercise. And also I will provide everyone with some resources. So something that I just touched on a couple seconds ago, but want to remind everyone that stress and anxiety may affect anyone, right? So that could be you, or it could be me. It could be our partners, our spouses, our children, parents, siblings, other family members, caregivers, friends, coworkers, those on our medical team, our neighbors, and our schoolmates. So really, anxiety is not just an individual problem, it is a community problem. I want to introduce you to stress. So stress is normal. It's a normal human reaction, and it happens to everyone. Stress is this feeling of emotional or physical tension that we get, and we can either feel that in our bodies or think about it and feeling stressed. It really stems from any event or thought that makes you frustrated or angry or nervous. And then our body's reaction, it's also our body's reaction to a challenge or a demand or a threat. And so that fight or flight response is pretty much how our body might potentially react to stress. And then stress can be positive when it helps us avoid danger. So as in those fight or flight situations. It can also be positive when it helps us meet deadlines and get work done. So this is just a picture of the Yerkes-Dodson law, and it's talking about stress and performance and optimal stress. So this kind of right in the center is the best stress, right? So everybody deals with stress. You know, as we become more tense or more aroused, or our anxiety increases, you know, we are less apt to perform. And the same goes for if we're under aroused, or, you know, we're feeling bored or disengaged, then too, we will not be at optimal performance. So we want to have that kind of right, nice mix that kind of helps activate our energy, and it moves us forward. So you don't want to be not stressed enough or not feel stressed enough, and you don't want to be too stressed, because then that could lead to pretty significant anxiety or burnout. So stress is really just a short-term response to a recognized threat, and there's some overlap in symptoms between stress and anxiety. And, you know, essentially anxiety comes in when that short-term stress kind of extends and lingers. And, you know, you may not have an identifiable trigger when thinking about being anxious. And I'm sure you've heard people say, like, oh, I just come from an anxious family, right? So maybe you've always experienced feelings of anxiousness for a long time, or perhaps you had an event where you felt anxious and it was stressful, and then, you know, you developed a pattern way of thinking and a way of responding to that stress that now you apply to all different situations, and that is really, you know, what anxiety looks like as it lingers. And so some of those symptoms that you might experience when feeling stressed are moodiness or irritability or anger, might feel lonely, might have some dizziness or shortness of breath or anxious thoughts, general unhappiness. And then the overlap piece between stress and anxiety, or, you know, you might have like a physiological response. So faster heartbeat, or, you know, you're breathing heavier, faster. Sometimes you may experience diarrhea or constipation, because our body does react to stress in that way. And then, just long-term anxiety looks like or can look like restlessness or feeling on edge or tense, sweating, nervousness, or just this general feeling of uneasiness or dread. There's some overlap between depression and anxiety. Oftentimes, anxiety can lead to depression, or we'll start to notice symptoms of anxiety early on for those people who go on to be depressed. Some of the overlapping symptoms between depression and anxiety include restlessness, problems with thinking and concentrating and making decisions, particularly if we have too many options. It might look like excessive worrying, worrying about our health, worrying about worrying about our neighbors, worrying about having headaches and what does this mean, things like that. It could be unexplained physical complaints, such as headaches or stomach aches. Oftentimes in children, we may see physical complaints because they might not necessarily have the vocabulary to let us know that they're feeling stressed or anxious about something. And then just general agitation. And so, in looking at symptoms of anxiety specifically, we can break it down into physical symptoms, psychological symptoms, and behavioral symptoms, right? And so some of those physical symptoms might be headache or having a dry mouth or experiencing stomach pains or diarrhea. It might look like muscle aches. Psychological symptoms that we may see in ourselves or others is just excessive worry or irritability, feeling really tired, having lots of worries, that mind racing, or constantly thinking about things. Might be difficult to fall asleep because of that, difficulty concentrating, or thinking that we have problems with our memory. And then what that looks like in terms of our behavior, it could look somewhat like obsessive or compulsive behaviors or repetitive thinking or thoughts, or a repetitive focus on some particular thought or behavior. It could look like phobic behavior, so being really fearful of something in particular. I'm going to give an example later of spiders, so it could look like that. Being really phobic of spiders, avoiding situations. Oftentimes, people who are anxious find reasons to avoid situations, and it can also look like distress when in social situations. So I'm going to switch gears and introduce activities of daily living. And so, general activities of daily living are sleep and nutrition and hydration, and our level of activity and our level of socialization. We could also put in there academics or our work life. And so we definitely have some daily goals, and we know that a combination of healthy functioning and activities of daily living can help us to feel better, feel less anxious. So particularly, right, if we get enough sleep, we're not tired the next day, not feeling emotional. If we have a healthy diet, that can contribute to our mood. Hydration can as well. It's oftentimes something that we don't necessarily think about, but having adequate water intake or liquid intake can certainly affect our mood. I mean, certainly that nutrition and hydration piece can sometimes we may talk about it, and you may have heard people say, like, I'm feeling really hangry, right? So we want to make sure that we don't have dips in blood sugar or in hydration, so that because that can impact our mood. Just daily level of activity, right? A physical activity is getting out and doing something for 30 minutes a day. And that can look like being outside, doing exercise. It can look like, you know, playing a sports activity on the Wii, you know, moving around, taking the dog for a walk. And then socialization is also something that can really impact mood, both negatively and positively if we're not engaging in that activity. And so really our daily goal is to have 2 positive social interactions a day. So anxiety can have an impact on our activities of daily living, particularly, right, if we're worrying about something that could be how I'm managing my chronic illness. It could be what I'm going to, what kind of grade I'm going to get at school. It could be I'm wearing a mask at school and nobody else is, or at work, or how am I going to get all of my children to all of their activities by, you know, by 6 o'clock today. Any number of ways of thinking or anxiety can affect our activities of daily living and our mental health. And we know that when our mental health is poor, it also can provide additional challenges to managing chronic illness, and making that a little more difficult. So again, talking about those daily activities of daily living, I put a couple more up there, right? So we've got sleep and nutrition, toileting, the daily physical activity, relationships, school or work, and then our social interactions. And so anxiety can look different for different people. It can look different for adults and children. And so here are some ways that it can present itself for anybody. So, you know, kind of this desire to control things and always have a plan, or not be able to just say, okay, we're driving to the park. You know, somebody might want to know, okay, once we get there, then we're going to do X, Y, and Z. And then after that, you're going to do this and I'm going to do this. So that real desire to control people or events. It can present itself as having difficulty falling asleep and staying asleep. So just constant worry, or, you know, racing thoughts, thinking about things you have to do the next day, checking off those lists, worrying about parents or relationships, or generally anything. Can look like feeling agitated or angry, having high expectations for self or others related to our activities. In children and adults, it can look like defiance and challenging behaviors. It might present as physical pain, so stomach aches or headaches. It could present itself as, you know, excessive emotionality, so crying, or you know, excessive laughing, and an inability to control that at times. It could look like over planning for situations or events, just to help quell that worry, and then just intolerance of that uncertainty or ambiguity. So this is anxiety in children, and 8 ways that it could possibly show up as something else in your child. But I also think that this applies to teens and adults alike. So it Anxiety can manifest and show up as anger. It can show up as difficulty sleeping. It can show up as defiance, or particularly with children, but also in adults, in relationships. Don't tell me what to do, or you shouldn't be doing this like that, or I'm not doing that. It can show up as over planning or avoiding, particularly avoiding going to school, or it can present as looking like, the child has a physical ailment, and vomiting, and so avoiding going to school or doing a task. It can present as being overly negative or having a lack of focus. And my favorite is chandeliering. So this idea when you have somebody who is a generally calm person, all of a sudden just completely flips out for no reason, and it's hard to say like what happened there. And so really the point of the talk today is to address those symptoms of anxiety, or to talk about anxiety, and to learn some strategies for how to disrupt that downward spiral. So we don't want you to go down that rabbit hole of having different thinking patterns and coming out on the other end and catastrophizing or having problems sleeping and things like that. I often tell people that I see in therapy that anxiety and feelings of anxiety and not sharing them and not talking about them is kind of like the recycle bin at our house, where nobody at my house likes to take out the recycle bin, and it always has to be somebody else's job. And we are all doing a really, really good job of, trying to stuff as much stuff as we possibly can into that recycle bin, till finally one person puts one thing in there and then like 17 things pop out, and then you're picking them all up. And we do that sometimes with our feelings, whether that's feelings of anxiety or depression. We sometimes stuff them down and don't work on them and don't share them, and then eventually, we put one more thing in there, we ignore it one more time, and then everything comes out. So we really want to disrupt that spiral. And how do we do that? So we do that using cognitive behavioral therapy, or it's also known as CBT. It can help break those unhelpful cycles that we can get in. And cognitive behavioral therapy, it's really a short-term and a short time-limited psychological therapy. It's structured, it's interactive, it's goal-based. It explores and identifies how our thoughts and our feelings and our physiology and our behaviors are related, and how unhelpful patterns and habits can be formed. And so the therapy piece of it really focuses on disrupting those problematic patterns through challenging our thoughts, challenging our behaviors, and challenging how our body responds, so that we can shift and change how we feel in the moment, so in the here and now. And it is all about developing new patterns and new perspectives, new ways of thinking and feeling to help us manage feelings of anxiety or depression. And so some of the strategies that we learn, coping skills, as we often call them in CBT, are counter-stimulation, distraction, cognitive control, and relaxation. And so I'll start with counter-stimulation. It's a strategy where we use our senses, all 5 of them. You can use taste and touch and sight and our hearing and our smell, and we use one or more of our senses to really help us kind of redirect our thinking. So if we're feeling anxious and we're having a headache or a stomach ache, and then we're worrying about, well, what does that mean? Does that mean that I'm sick? Does that mean that I have COVID? Does that mean I have migraines or something? How do I take my sense of sight or sense of smell and disrupt that pattern of thinking? So an example might be using, let's use our sense of sight, right? I can say, okay, that's not a helpful thought. What are 5 things that I can see right now? I also might like to use an essential oil or a peppermint candy. So if I had an essential oil, I might put some lavender or oil or something that's strong, maybe more like a lemon scent, on a cotton ball. And when I'm feeling anxious, I might just say, okay, I'm going to focus on smelling this essential oil for the next 2 minutes and really noticing what I'm smelling. If I had a peppermint candy, it might look like popping it into my mouth and noticing like, oh, this is really strong. I can taste it. My tongue is tingling, things like that. And so the idea of using counter stimulation is that, it's simple, it's strong, it's pleasant, and then it can be light and relaxing, and it can take our focus off that anxious feeling and really give us something more concrete to focus on. So, it also could be if I'm having a headache, or, my child is having a meltdown about something, I could say, here, hold this ice pack. Right? And if you're holding an ice pack, particularly if I say put it underneath your armpit or put it on your inner thigh, it's really hard to focus on whatever was making you anxious or having a meltdown, because now the having that feeling of cold underneath my armpit or on my leg for 2 to 3 minutes, it's hard to ignore that. So I'm really just now focusing on the cold. So that's counter stimulation, using our senses. Distraction is also something that we can do to keep us from focusing on those anxious thoughts. So just, and we all use distractions all the time, right? And that can look like watching TV or doing some gardening, or maybe taking on a relaxing task of, walking the dog or going outside for a walk or taking a warm shower. So really it's activities that we engage in to take our mind off of what's bothering us. It could be reading. It can also be noticeably focusing on emotions that are opposite of what we're feeling. So if we're feeling worried, think about a time that you didn't feel worried. Things like that. Cognitive control is another coping strategy. And with cognitive control, we use imagery, and that is an exercise where we think of a place that is relaxing for us and makes us feel good, and we really try and incorporate all of our senses in that image, and we create this mental image in our mind. So if your happy place is an island in the middle of the ocean, we think about what do we see, what do we hear, the gentle breeze, and the maybe we hear children playing on the beach, maybe we just hear the wind. What do we smell? We smell ocean smells and seaweed, and we can feel the sun on our skin, things like that. So really creating a relaxing image in our mind and using that to help us redirect and refocus on something that is less stressful. We also use mindfulness techniques and positive self-talk, and we'll go through a little bit more of mindfulness techniques. I have an exercise later in the talk, and as well as using positive self-talk and positive statements. So really helping to boost how we feel about ourselves, about situations, and about the activities that we're doing and how we're experiencing our body sensations. And then relaxation is another coping skill that we train in to help manage anxiety. And relaxation training can look like breathing exercises, either deep breathing or paced breathing. Square breathing is another one, and I have an exercise for that, for a breathing exercise later in our presentation. It can also look like progressive muscle relaxation, where we kind of isolate different muscle groups in our body, and we tense them and relax them, kind of moving through the different muscle groups of our body, starting with our head all the way down to our toes, so that we can really get a sense for what does my body feel like when it is not relaxed, and what does it feel like when it is relaxed. And then, of course, mini relaxation is just a short version of that, something you can do, at your desk in the grocery store line, as you're sitting in the front seat of your car, wherever you are. And then there's also multiple apps and YouTube videos about relaxation and stress reduction, and different helpful tools that you can use there. And the idea of using these different strategies is that we have to practice them. So similar to somebody who plays sports or plays an instrument or does a job, we're not always good or great at it first time around, and that's okay. Sometimes some of these skills might be new to people, and so if we practice them regularly, and we remind ourselves to practice them, and we practice them outside of times when we're not feeling particularly stressed, then we become very good at it, and it's just like second nature. So then you can use it at times where you do notice that you're stressed or feeling anxious. Strategies that you can practice, talking about here, are, use pacing. So you don't just jump right in, right? That's this idea of practice. You don't just jump right in, you're very good about everything. You want to pace in to doing things. So, maybe you start out and say, okay, I'm going to try this, twice in the morning, for a few days, and then after a few days more, maybe I'll pace up and I'll start doing it 5 days a week. Same goes with exercise. You can't just run out and run a marathon. You have to train and practice for that. And so you want to pace into that change. A helpful behavioral tool to remind us to use these coping strategies and learn them and practice them is setting alarms and reminders. And now everybody has either some sort of smart device, or maybe I'm overstating, but a lot of people have alarms and smart devices or iPads where you can set an alarm or set a reminder. And so if I want to remind myself to practice something like a breathing exercise, I might set an alarm for 7:30 every morning. It goes off and it just says breathing. And so I know when that goes off that I'll practice breathing, in that moment for a couple of minutes. If anybody has a smartwatch, I know on mine there's an app that pops up that reminds you to practice breathing. There's also one that reminds you to stand up. So something similar to that, you could use the alarms and reminders function on your smartphone. Another strategy that we use to help reduce anxiety is called pleasant event scheduling, right? We don't want to forget to do the fun stuff. That's what renews us. That's what helps us feel more connected to people. It helps us feel more connected with ourselves and like our old selves, new selves, person we want to be. Right? So we really, if we've stopped doing those things during times of stress or times of anxiety, we really want to try and add those back in. And so, perhaps you don't have all the time in the world, but I bet you could find, one minute or 5 minutes a day to really do something that's just for you, something that you find pleasant, whether that's just tucking off and reading a book for a minute, listening to your favorite song, lighting a candle, going out to dinner with friends, whatever that looks like for you. We don't want to forget to do the fun things. And so that's called pleasant event scheduling. Rehearsing and problem solving. So having a plan, if going somewhere or doing a particular activity makes you feel nervous, it's helpful to, write down the steps, rehearse the steps, kind of identify what might possibly, happen, and how you might address it in the moment if it does. And so having a plan, and I always tell everybody, anxiety doesn't like a plan. So if you have a plan for how you might meet challenges, and you've gone through different ways of problem solving that, it's gonna be okay. It's gonna look good. Also, using positive messaging. So the way that we think about things can really have an impact on how we feel about ourselves, how we physically feel. And so it's important to give ourselves those positive self messages. And sometimes we don't know where to start or even how to do that. And so it could literally look like just writing it down. And telling ourselves that. It could look like using sticky notes. It could look like spending putting a sticky note on the mirror in the bathroom just to remind you every day, you're fantastic. And then also having a support network is very helpful when we are feeling anxious. So, finding those people that really boost you up, or sit with you when you're feeling upset or you're nervous, and having someone to talk to can be very, very helpful and useful. And so this is just, a quick idea of how you might use positive self-messaging, right? Sometimes when I ask kids in therapy, what might you say? What's a positive message that you might give yourself? Sometimes they say, I don't know. And I always say, you know what, that's okay. Like, you're not used to doing this. It might seem weird at first, right? Like really kind of hyping yourself up and talking about yourself in this way. But if it feels strange, you can do it in a sticky note fashion. And here's some ideas of how you might give yourself positive self messages, right? You've got this, or you're wonderful, or you can do hard things, or it's okay to relax, or there's people who love you, don't forget to breathe, don't forget to go outside. I like this slide, particularly, I hand this out in the clinic, oftentimes to parents, but I think it applies beyond the anxious child. It applies to, how we interact with anybody who's feeling anxious, including ourselves. So these are messages that you might share either with yourself, with a child, with somebody a loved one, coworker, whomever who's feeling anxious, right? I'm here for you. Sometimes people aren't looking for an answer of how to do it differently. They're just looking to know that they have some support. You know, it's okay to feel nervous. I do sometimes too. Or, you know, we can talk back to this worry. You know, if you can name the worry, we can talk back to it and think about how to make that smaller. So now I just want to take a quick minute and do a quick practice of square breathing. And square breathing, so if you can see here, essentially we want to, on the horizontals, we want to breathe in. On the vertical lines of the square, we want to hold it, and then come back around to exhaling on the horizontal. So if everyone could just sit back and relax in your chair as much as you can. Find a point of focus. If it helps you to close your eyes, that's very helpful. If not, that's okay. Just find something to focus on, and we will get started. So I want you to just inhale deep from your abdominal, or from your abdomen or your diaphragm. Sometimes it might help to put a hand on your diaphragm to feel that inhale and feel that exhale. So I want you to inhale, 2, 3, 4, hold, 2, 3, 4, and exhale, 2, 3, 4, hold, 2, 3, 4, and inhale, 2, 3, 4, hold, 2, 3, 4, exhale, 2, 3, 4, and hold, 2, 3, 4. So obviously we might do that for longer if it wasn't a webinar, and that's something that you can do at home, and you can practice. I'll go back to that. You can practice, you know, set an alarm, do that in the morning before you even wake out of bed, as you wake up and before you even get out of bed, right? And say, okay, I'm going to practice this 4 times today before I set my feet on the floor. For children, if you know, thinking about it is too hard, you can literally draw a square for them, and as they are, you know, they can take a crayon, and as they draw the line across the horizontal, they can breathe in, and they might want to breathe out on the or exhale on the verticals, and then breathe in again on the horizontal, and just keep going as a way of kind of fighting repetitive motion and calming down. So another strategy that we can use is, you know, kind of really looking at thinking about how we think, because it really can affect the way we feel. And there's often thinking patterns that we engage in that are not helpful for us, and can contribute to our feelings of anxiety. So this idea of mind reading, well, I know what they're thinking and they don't like me, would be an example. All or nothing thinking, sometimes we call that black and white thinking, right? If I don't get this, you know, this grade on my exam, then I will never get this job, or I'll never be good enough, right? That all or nothing thinking. There's no middle ground there. That I kind of just gave another example of catastrophizing, right? Like, if I don't get this, then my life will end. Or, if I don't pass this exam, I'm never going to graduate high school, and then I won't get a good job, and then I won't, I'll never have a family. And so just really taking those thoughts to the nth degree. Trying to predict the future is another pattern of thinking that really we don't have control over that. And so that's not necessarily helpful. Labeling things as something when that's not necessarily true, or labeling them in a particular way, such as this is awful, or I'm awful, or so and so hates me. Or and another way of unhelpful thinking would be using, like, discounting all the positive things and really only focusing on the negative things in terms of events in your life or interactions. And so how can we manage those thoughts that we're having, right? We can challenge them right back. Those maladaptive thoughts that we have at times, or those patterns of thinking, they're not helpful. So an example might be, one bad grade doesn't make me a failure. Or I've had experiences that are more difficult than this, and I made it through just fine. We can also use something called thought stopping. And it's really this idea that when we notice that we're doing these, we're engaging in these thinking patterns, to just say stop, whether that's in our minds, or if we have to say it out loud, that's okay too. Stop, right? This is not helpful. We can also ask ourselves, what would you say to a friend? Oftentimes the things that we say to ourselves are much harder. We're much more hard on ourselves, and they're hurtful, and we would never say that to a friend, right? So I might say to a friend, like, it's okay to feel how you do, or you'll get through this, or you've done really hard things before, you can do this. Whereas, you might say to yourself, like, why can't you do this? You're always failing at this. You would not say that to your friend. So I want to challenge you to, to change that and ask yourself, like, how would I help a friend through this? We can also use alternative thoughts, or because they're helpful coping statements, right? So you can do anything for 20 minutes, or if you break it down into steps, like, you can just do the first step, or what can I learn from this, or how likely is this to happen? So really kind of challenging that and coming up with alternative helpful coping statements. And sometimes, you might just want to play the detective. So how do I know this is true? Can I predict the future? Things like that. And so just quickly, I'm going to say, one of the ways that I mentioned previously is, if you're having worries or fears, it's important to identify the steps so that you can face those fears intentionally, because that helps reduce anxiety or feelings of anxiety over time. And how you do that, you can break it down. So break down whatever it is that's worrying you, or that fear experience, into individual steps. And you might want to start with the least scary to the most scary. And if it helps to write them down, it helps to write them down. And then you want to just focus on working on the first step. So an example might be, I worked with a young man who had a fear of spiders. And so, we kind of looked at, what's the fear, the fear of spiders. And we did a hierarchy of, talking about spiders made him nervous and worried. Seeing pictures of spiders was worse. Seeing spiders in real life and having to kind of navigate his surroundings when those actual spiders was the worst thing ever for him. So, you know, we started out by kind of naming those steps, and then, you know, focused on just talking about spiders, just getting him comfortable and exposed to talking about spiders. You know, and then we were able to move on to looking at pictures of spiders and identifying like which ones are the most scariest and which ones are not as scary, and why is that really hairy one the most scary and this one's not as much. And then, you know, moving forward to you know, identifying kind of what he would do when he's in the presence of the spider, and actually having that exposure in his home to a spider, and then you know, going through the plan to manage anxiety when he's in the presence of a spider. So mini relaxation is another practice that I mentioned earlier, and I thought this would be a good moment for everybody to really just engage in a mini relaxation exercise. So if we had more time, we might want to, you know, start and do more of a progressive muscle relaxation, where you tense, you know, each individual isolated muscle group and go that way. But a great mini relaxation exercise that we'll do now is I'm going to ask everybody to really just tense up all your muscles at once, including like your eyes and your forehead. And so, you know, we're just really, everything is tensed up, just tense. And I want you to hold it for 5 seconds, hold your breath, really kind of just curl your toes and tense your legs, everything. And now just let it all go. So almost like you're melting back into your seat. You are an ice cream cone that is just melting back onto the ground on a hot summer day. And kind of notice what that feels like in your body to have had, you know, that experience where everything's tensed and you're holding it tense, and then let it go. Okay, so just a couple more slides before questions. You know, supportive tips for parents and caregivers and individuals who experience anxiety is, you know, if it's you, right, encourage yourself. If it's not you, encourage the anxious person to manage anxiety independently once they've learned strategies to help them cope. Right? Because then they can feel like they have more control, or you can feel like you have more control over the outcomes, right? If we're constantly offloading our well-being to somebody else, if they're not there, particularly as it relates to anxiety. If I always need mom to calm me down and mom's not around, how am I supposed to calm down? So I need to be able to manage my fear and my worry and my stress on my own. You know, as caregivers and parents and others, you know, we really want to praise efforts for coping and managing stress. That's very important. Just to be encouraging and let them know, like, wow, you're working hard on this. You've done a good job. We want to encourage normal activity during times of stress. So stress or anxiety, right? What we don't want is for us, excuse me, us to be so caught up in our thoughts and our feelings that we stop doing the things that we normally would do. So if attending school makes us feel anxious, we don't want you to stop attending school. We want you to acknowledge that you feel anxious attending school. Look at the plan, identify ways that you'll manage feeling anxious, and, you know, and have a contingency plan for what you can do on your own and what you might need help with. So when working with somebody who has anxiety, we want to avoid joining in that stress and those feelings of anxiety. So we definitely know that sometimes we can exacerbate it. If if a child is anxious and then we're feeling anxious, then they notice that and it can keep going. So if we're able to attend to them, it's most helpful to attend from a standpoint of feeling relaxed so that we can help them relax. Being mindful of our communication when we're checking in is also very important, right? And so what we really want to do here is focus on, sending those messages of, you can do difficult things. I'm here for you. Let's talk back to this worry. But not necessarily continue to use words that are causing them to be anxious. So if they're feeling pain, we don't want to really talk about, I'm so sorry you're in pain and things like that. We might ask a question of, are you comfortable? Is there something I can do to help you feel more comfortable? And then it's also important for parents and caregivers and anybody to recognize stress and anxiety is part of our everyday lives, and we all deal with it. And so modeling problem solving out loud, saying, man, I'm feeling really stressed today, here's what I'm going to do about it. Or I think I need to take 5 minutes just to myself so that I can help my body calm down, can be very useful, and a good model for others to see that, one, they're not alone, and two, here's a nice way of managing it. And then it's also important to know that, if anxiety or the symptoms are, frequent or becoming more frequent, and they're persisting over time, it might be time to seek help from either a psychologist or a counselor. Seeking help might be necessary when anxiety or worry starts to impair functioning in activities of daily living or in your relationships, and also when it's distressing or you're not able to control it, or as a parent or caregiver, you're feeling helpless to help your loved one. And then I have some resources here, and there are a couple of other books that I didn't put on the slide that I wanted to just kind of make you aware of. But a lot of these are, apps that you can get on your phone or your tablet. They also have, YouTube has any number of these stress reduction and mindfulness apps. Zenden is a really great one for kids. It's on a YouTube channel. They do yoga. They make it fun. Then I've got some workbooks. Mindfulness and stress reduction workbook can be helpful for adults or teens. There's one called the CBT Toolbox for Children. Could be helpful. And then, coping skills workbooks for teens, right? Ways to deal with stress and anxiety and anger. And then I don't know if you can see my screen, but I have a book here called What to Do When You Worry Too Much. And it's really a helpful resource for young children feeling anxious. And it's a way to help them understand anxiety and to overcome it. And so I just want to thank everyone today, and I'm looking forward to questions. Okay, so one of the questions that I received was, when my son first presented with clumsiness at age 3, it was nearly dismissed due to sudden severe anxiety. Which came first, DM or anxiety? So I think, essentially, that's very hard to say what came first in terms of symptoms. But essentially, DM. There is a genetic component to DM, so the DM came first. If we want to talk about it specifically from a genetic standpoint. However, it's hard to say if his symptoms of, the physical symptoms of DM manifested first versus the anxiety piece, and especially at the age of 3. We do know that there is with the brain changes that are seen in individuals who have DM, sometimes it affects those executive functions, which are in the frontal lobe. So how we think and how we remember things and what we do, how we inhibit our behavior and our thoughts and the things that we say. And so if those things aren't functioning in a typical way, perhaps we're anxious about that, or perhaps we're constantly getting feedback from others about that type of behavior, which could be contributing to anxiety. So I'm sorry that I can't answer that specifically, but hopefully my answer was helpful here. Another question that was sent in was, how does anxiety affect the gastrointestinal issues? And this person has DM2. So I know that both individuals who are both DM1 and DM2 have some GI issues, right? Whether it's constipation or diarrhea. One of the things that we know about anxiety is that, it does have an impact on our physical functioning. And so in thinking about our that fight or flight response that is our body and brain's way of managing anxiety, it comes down to our sympathetic nervous system and our parasympathetic nervous system. So, one of these regulates the way in which, our heart rate, how fast our heart rate goes, and whether we are having regular bowel movements, and if we have dry mouth or things like that. And so when we feel stressed, we're kind of conserving all of our energies just to manage, just basic body functions. And so, we can start to experience additional difficulties as it relates to the anxiety and the GI system. So, if you're feeling anxious, perhaps you're more constipated. If you're feeling anxious, perhaps you're having more stomach aches. If you're feeling anxious, perhaps you're having more diarrhea. And that, so what we really want to do is engage our parasympathetic nervous system, which helps us to de-stress. And so those CBT strategies and things that I was mentioning earlier can be very helpful in getting our parasympathetic nervous system to kind of de-stress, or almost like parachute down and help our body calm down and de-stress. Let's see. Somebody else asked, my daughter has a lot of anxiety. Is it due to her first 2 years in a Russian orphanage, or could it be related to her diagnosis of DM? I think that that's a great question. I think the answer here is most likely that it's not it's not so simple as it's either or. It's probably both, depending on what her experiences were. During those early years, kind of, did she receive comfort and soothing when she was upset? Was she able to make attachments with caregivers while she was in the orphanage? Was it modeled for her, comforting and self-soothing, or was she left to her own devices as a very young infant, all the way to 2 years old, to just try and figure out how to manage upset and feeling comfortable. So all of our experiences can have an impact on anxiety, and how we manage that, as well as DM, as we've been talking about, can have an impact on feeling anxious. So what types of anxiety issues are common with DM patients, is the next question that somebody had asked. And I think, like health-related anxiety certainly can be one of the issues. Anxiety about, I have GI issues, and maybe I want to know exactly where the closest restroom is, because I need to get there when I need to get there. So feeling anxious about that. It could be, worrying about falling and going places. And so, if those things are uncertain, or I don't have the physical support that I might need to get around and to go around, perhaps I'm worried about that. I'm worried about falling. Spending time in social situations can be anxiety provoking for lots of people, and a lot of these worries might overlap, right? So maybe I don't want to go and meet all your new friends because I'm worried about how they might, what they might think about me, or my brain works differently than theirs, and so are they judging me for this, right? Like, am I worried about that? Am I worried about how others are perceiving me and judging me? That's one of the common characteristics of social anxiety. And then like generalized anxiety is really just worrying about all sorts of things. It could be related to your health. It could be related to your family. It could be related to the activities that you have to do the next day. It could be related to the hangnail that you have on your finger, and you think, you take it out to the nth degree, and the next thing you know, you have a gaping wound on your hand. So, that's generalized anxiety. And I think that they all can apply to any individual with DM, as well as anybody in general. Another question: if anxiety is comorbid with DM, does medication and CBT assist anxiety as effectively as those with anxiety but without DM? So I think that's that's individual specific, may not necessarily be all or one. What we do know about medication and CBT is, as far as how it treats anxiety in the general population, and those who do have anxiety, is that they are equally efficacious modalities of treatment on their own. And also, when they are combined, they tend to have a stronger effect and be more efficacious. So, taking an anxiety medication to just to help kind of bring you to a baseline where you can focus on learning CBT strategies to help you with your thoughts and your feelings and your thinking. That can be, like, sorry, I don't mean that can be very helpful, and we know that that combination is more efficacious than just either therapy alone or medication alone. And for some individuals, just having a little bit of an anti-anxiety medication works for what they need in the moment, and others, really are able to just use the coping skills that they learn in CBT treatment to help reduce their anxiety to a level where they can function in those activities of daily living in a way where they can thrive. Let's see. Is there anything, who's asking this? Somebody asked, is there anything I can do to take away laziness? How do I exercise if I'm on the ground? I have to call the fire department to help me to stand. And do you recommend anything for depression? Were a number of comments from one individual. So, I think that idea of pacing, setting alarms, setting a goal can be very helpful. If we want to optimize the kind of the level of stress that we feel, so we can activate activate energy to move forward, to engage in activities like exercise. And exercise can look different for everybody, right? Not everybody exercises in the same way, and so you're really knowing what your limits are, and what you can do with your body to engage in some sort of physical activity may look very different than what somebody else can do, right? So somebody might be able to run a marathon, somebody else might be able to walk around the block, or sit in a chair and do kind of arm exercises, or lift small weights, or use a resistance band in the home without actually having to go outside. It could it could look like partnering with someone. So it's always easier to do exercise, or at least in my experience, it's easier to do exercise if I know that, like, oh, I've scheduled the time to do this with somebody else, and kind of they're counting on me, and now we're partners in this, and so that can help, and they can help motivate there also. And again, going back to those strategies of setting alarms and reminders, and just constantly seeing that. Maybe we don't do it on day 1, day 2, day 3, but maybe by day 4, I've seen those messages this many times already, and I'm like, oh, okay, today I'll just try it, right? And I'm going to use pacing. I'm not going to start and know that maybe my end long-term goal is to be able to walk a mile or a half mile, but I haven't been doing anything, so I know I can't do that today. So today my goal is just to map out my route. Tomorrow my goal is to put my exercise clothes on, or identify a friend who can come with me. Maybe the third day it's I'm going to walk to the end of the block and back. And so really just kind of mapping out the steps, and then planning for that, and pacing into it, right? We don't learn how to be great at something in a day, and we just need to practice over and over again. Somebody else asked, what is recommended to minimize anxiety? Why is there so much anxiety around sound? And is some of the anxiety due to physical ability and feeling insecure, and if so, how can we help that? Great questions. So in terms of, I think I've addressed what is recommended to minimize anxiety. Certainly, kind of identifying in, in your life, what are the things that matter? What are the things that don't matter? Who is there and is helpful for you? Who's your support team? Who's your group of cheerleaders? Right? Like, let's stick with those people. And, and how can they help you? Right? Do we need to really focus on those activities of daily living? So am I getting enough sleep? Is my nutrition correct? Am I getting enough physical activity? Am I, I'm missing one of them and I can't remember it right now. Right, but focusing on those activities of daily living. Do I have enough time socializing with friends and family? Right, all of those things we know help to minimize anxiety. Why is there so much anxiety around sound? So that is a very good question. Sometimes it could just be this idea that, like, you're overstimulated. And so sound can just be the one sense that is maybe either puts you over the top or just feels you experience it in a way that's magnified that maybe other people don't experience it. So, how can we reduce anxiety if it's related to sound? And we know, well, we can't go to this restaurant because it's too loud. Well, are they feeling anxious about the sound, or are they feeling anxious because they can't hear people when it's that loud? And then they can't engage in the conversations, and then they sit back, and then people stop talking to them. Right? And then, our mind could possibly take over, and then we're doing the, are they judging me? And so then it looks like social anxiety. So, can you wear noise canceling headphones? Can you limit the number of people that are around? If you're in a home, that's busy and noisy and there's lots of people, is there a quiet place where you can go and just reset for 5 minutes? Do you need to schedule those breaks during the day, just to kind of like a brain break, just to give your senses an opportunity to reset? If you're doing dinners out, maybe having a plan, like, what do we do if it's too loud? Can I get up and excuse myself for a moment? Can I wear headphones to this restaurant? Can we ask for a table that's either outside or in a quiet part of the restaurant? So those are other ways that you can help mitigate anxiety, particularly if it is related to sound. And can we limit the number of people that are there or going to be there? Is some of the anxiety due to physical ability and feeling insecure? And if so, how can we help that? I think, certainly there could be anxiety due to physical ability. Right, particularly if you're, if there's worries about falls or not being able to keep up or feeling so fatigued, if there's worries about, comparing yourself or themselves to other people who have different physical abilities, that certainly can play in to those feelings of insecurity. Either about yourself and how you view yourself, or about your actual ability, particularly as it relates to other people. That social comparison, we tend to do that, and it's not always helpful. And so, in thinking about, like, the cognitive behavioral strategies that we can use and employ is really kind of, challenging those thoughts that we have around our anxiety, around our abilities or lack of ability, and around our differences. And I think it's okay to say, hey, I just do things differently, and that's okay. So using some of those techniques to challenge that, or to identify an alternative thought to the one that might be stuck in your head. Somebody said, I have never had anxiety or depression like I have now since I was diagnosed with DM1, adult onset, 52, and now approximately 3 years. And so I think, this person makes a really important, an important point. This person has lived for 52 years without, without experiencing some of the physical, the physical symptoms, and so they probably could possibly have an identity of this is where I am, but now I have this new part to me, and this is changing me, and how do I incorporate this into who I am and how I feel about myself, and how I present myself to other people. And so really just understanding that things have changed, and and how do you meet some of those new challenges that you now face? How did you meet some of the challenges that you faced before you were diagnosed with DM? And really kind of looking at some of those skills like that you already have. What did you do at times when things were really hard before? Because we all go through these really hard things. Did you reach out to friends? Did you journal? Did you use mindfulness strategies? Did you talk about it? What did you do? Did you use exercise or physical activity? And really find those things that you did before, identify the ones that worked, and the ones that you can still use, because there's overlap there, can be really helpful, as well as maybe it's what can I do now? What's new strategies? Maybe I never needed therapy before, or never needed to take a medication to help with that, but maybe I do now, and that's okay. Let's see. Somebody asked, how is anxiety different from someone with DM versus a caregiver for someone with DM? And should you manage anxiety differently? So I think, I think my overall takeaway on anxiety as it relates to both the DM population, the caregiver population, and the population in general is that, there's so much overlap in kind of what it looks like and how we address it, both for individuals who are affected by DM, as well as caregivers, as well as anybody else in the community. And management, there's kind of the overarching strategies for how to manage anxiety, and then just like anything in life, we can really just pick and choose what works for us, and what works for us might not work for somebody else. And so oftentimes when having chronic illness, it might be helpful to have an anxiolytic medication on board, to help get kind of level off some of those anxious feelings, or that up and down in terms of emotionality and emotion regulation, and then include therapy in there, or using some of these cognitive behavioral techniques so that you learn additional coping skills to help manage that. Somebody asked a question, is it normal to feel muscle pain and stiffness in DM2 patients because of anxiety? So I think, it's normal to feel muscle pain and stiffness in general at times when we're feeling anxious. So oftentimes, we just hold our bodies in a different way, and people, hold their stress in their shoulders, or maybe in their back, or they have leg cramps or things like that, because when we're feeling stressed, we tend to tense up. And so that was the point of the mini relaxation exercises, to really have an understanding of how your body feels when it's under stress, and how we hold our bodies when we're feeling stressed, and what it feels like to relax it. And so I think certainly when feeling stressed and anxious, knowing what we know, that it can cause us to, really tense up our muscles. I imagine that individuals who have DM2 also do this, and then that can lead to, additional pain or additional stiffness in your muscles that you're feeling. And I think I have one more here. So how much of the anxiety is reactive to a chronic illness, and how much is comorbid with the muscle disease? So if I'm understanding this question correctly, and I don't know that I'm understanding this. I think it's the comorbid muscle disease, can be considered the chronic illness. And so, individuals who have muscular dystrophy or myotonic dystrophy can experience anxiety, right? Because they have a chronic illness, and they have to go about doing things differently than others. And, they're in lots of ways, trying to fit in a world that oftentimes isn't designed for people with limited ability. And so that can be anxiety provoking, or just managing that chronic illness, or managing the muscle disease can be anxiety provoking. Thinking about, the family and managing the family, and what's going to happen to everybody, if my muscle disease progresses to a point where I can no longer work and make money to help support my family. These are all things that can manifest when having chronic illness or muscle or chronic illness such as myotonic dystrophy. But we also know that people who don't have chronic illness have mood disorder, or just generalized anxiety or social anxiety. And so I think it's hard to say how to pick those components apart, but we know that they are interactive, and that if we can kind of target ways of intervening using coping strategies or coping skills, it can be an effective way of managing anxiety symptoms and reducing those symptoms, or limiting those symptoms, particularly if we have chronic illness or chronic health conditions. And I think that is it for the questions. Does anybody else have any questions or concerns?
Missy, this is Mike again from the MDF. It doesn't look like we have any more questions or concerns right now, but
Okay.
I want to take this time to share MDF's gratitude to you for such an incredible, comprehensive, thoughtful presentation and taking so much time and lending your extraordinary expertise to answering so many questions from our community. So thank you so, so much. I did want to ask if you had any sort of parting thoughts or some like final comments for everyone before we go.
Thank you again. Thanks to everybody who's here and everybody who stayed. And I was thrilled to do this today. If anybody, I'm happy to share my slides. I think you mentioned that you were going to put them on your website, but I do have contact information here if anybody has any questions, or they can send them through you as well. I am available, or needs additional resources. And yeah, so, I think at this point in time, particularly at this stage of the pandemic and all the things that we have been living through in the last 18 months, I think it's really important to acknowledge that, that we are under stress, and that we're, all managing the best that we can. And sometimes it's important to learn new skills and strategies to help with that, and it's important to recognize and kind of reward ourselves or honor ourselves for all the hard work and the hard things that we've all been doing, just to get through. So thank you.